Bitcoin broke above $35,000 earlier today, fueled largely by investor optimism that spot Bitcoin ETFs are on the way. Joining us now to discuss is the Chief Legal Officer at Cboe Digital, Katherine Kirkpatrick. Boss, welcome to the show, Katherine.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I got to get your reaction to this market action this morning. Of course, a lot of people are saying that this is on ETF excitement. Cboe has had involvement in some of the spot Bitcoin ETF applications. What's your reaction?
Well, I think there's a lot of momentum and a lot of optimism. I think it's kind of funny because it's still truly impossible to predict when the commission is going to approve the ETF. They really have discretion. They could always choose to go back and have another issue with the applications. That being said, I think there's been a lot of positive developments in crypto, and people are getting excited. So it's nice to see additional investor engagement. You're seeing a lot of the big whales come back in. And generally, I think people are ready for crypto winter to start to thaw. So we're seeing kind of an overall, energy in the market. And I think people are cautiously optimistic that we're going to get an approval, December, January.
That's what a lot of analysts are saying, December, January. The conversation has really been about when, not if, the approval comes. Is there a chance it doesn't get approved? And what do you think those chances are?
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, I'm only speaking on a very high level because I was talking to a couple other lawyers in this space. No one really knows when we're going to get approval. So you're seeing a lot of speculation. You're seeing a lot of commentary. They're using best efforts, like things like the fact that the commission hasn't put up significant roadblocks in disclosure review, et cetera. But that's really somewhat anecdotal because the commission has every right to determine the timeline of approval. There may be additional litigation if we don't see approval in January, which could cause additional complication as to the overall timeline. But again, I think people, even the fact that we're here talking about when as opposed to if, that's a massive shift from even a year ago. And that is, I think, one of the biggest driving forces of all of this excitement.
We're about a year from November 2022 when FTX imploded and the general sentiment in the industry was not good. And so to see all of this TradFi institutional interest is really remarkable. What do you make of that? Did you expect to see this interest, these TradFi players really pushing for products like this so soon after the industry really kind of fell?
Well, it makes me extremely excited because one of the reasons I joined Cboe Digital is I believe in the intersection of TradFi and crypto. And we're seeing a lot of maturation around the whole crypto ecosystem as a result of the volatility of 2022. And that's absolutely essential in a nascent industry. You're also seeing a lot of easy entry points for crypto engagement. ETFs are a great example. You're seeing a lot of activity around tokenization. NFTs and gaming are also obviously growing rapidly. And those are easy entry points for people who otherwise aren't comfortable with crypto. ETFs, like let's wrap a crypto product in a TradFi product. It's a nice way for institutional investors or ultra high net worth individuals to kind of put their toe in the water without jumping in. And personally, as someone who's obviously a major proponent of the whole crypto ecosystem, I'm like, come in, the water's warm. This is very exciting to see this level of engagement. You're seeing growth and you're seeing we're still very young. We're still very, very young in this space, but you're seeing a lot of rapid development, both in the tech and also things like the legal and risk infrastructure, which is something we take really seriously.
On this show, we love to talk about Canada, and some of these ETF products have already been approved. They're already available to Canadians. And it still hasn't pushed the market in the way that some are expecting the spot Bitcoin ETF approval in the U.S. to push the market. Why do you think that is?
Well, you're seeing a huge discrepancy between how different regulators are treating the space. So I think it's appropriate for U.S. regulators not to automatically look to other regulators as to how to treat a product or an industry. So I think people are mature enough to realize that development in one jurisdiction does not mean anything for another jurisdiction. You're also seeing a lot of jurisdictions kind of change their mind about crypto. You're seeing pro-movement, and then you're seeing the next day something dramatically negative as to digital assets. So I think people are observing this carefully and observing, overall holistic movement that's pro-crypto in the G20 countries, which is really encouraging. But they're smart enough to know that that really doesn't mean anything for U.S. regulatory purposes.
How are TradFi players engaging with U.S. regulators when it comes to crypto? Often, especially in the news that we cover, we hear about crypto native companies engaging with regulators. Is the experience similar for TradFi players?
That's a great question. I think for TradFi players, you have entities like Cboe. We have a very long, good relationship with regulators. We value our relationship with regulators. Every step we take, we consider, we want to preserve that relationship. We want to be a good citizen and a good player in this space. And part of that is really positioning ourselves as kind of a safe option for institutional investors. They can engage with a fully intermediated solution that looks and feels more like a traditional market. I would say that a lot of TradFi players feel the same way, in that they're not going to be quite as disruptive or experimental given, their other interests. For example, if you're a public company and you have interests that have nothing to do with crypto, you don't want to upset the apple cart. And also just strategically, like, how does this affect our other business? How does this affect our current customers? Like, is this a growth opportunity for us on a number of fronts? So TradFi players really have to be a little bit more strategic, whereas crypto natives can be a little bit more disruptive and experimental, and that's appropriate.
Our previous guests, some of them called for more clarity. From a TradFi perspective, is there still more clarity needed from regulators?
I think clarity, it can mean a bunch of different things. Look, as someone in crypto, I would love the more rules and laws you can throw at me, the better. But I also don't want a situation where we have legislation or rulemaking implemented where they don't have comment or consideration from the ecosystem. Because something as simple as a definition, if it's overly broad, it can cause a lot of collateral damage to crypto. So I appreciate that everyone is at the same time right now trying to be strategic and thoughtful with things like legislation and rulemaking. And the policy voices, they're out there working really hard on the front lines of crypto to make sure that the infrastructure that's being put in place now, that's going to be impactful for years and years to come, is productive. And that's more important than just having a set of laws to work with tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a few different aspects of the industry earlier on, Web3 gaming, NFTs. Outside of ETFs, are there any other parts of crypto that institutional players like Cboe are looking at experimenting in?
Well, I would definitely say tokenization, because that's interesting. You could also call it digitization. The prospects of tokenization, you're seeing a lot of TradFi and even bank engagement in tokenization and experimentation, because the sky is the limit for tokenization. Like, let's talk about tokenized ETFs, tokenized bonds, tokenized commodities. So that's a really interesting facet, because I think you step away from all of the crypto or the altcoins, which a lot of TradFi players turn down their noses at, and you can say, well, look, it's absolutely indisputable when you look at the efficiencies of tokenized assets and the speed and the settlement efficiency. So I think we're going to see more engagement on that front for sure.
Katherine, thanks so much for joining the show this morning, and good luck with the rest of the day.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that was Chief Legal Officer at Cboe Digital, Katherine Kirkpatrick, boss